My family used to spend summers at our property in the woods near Eureka Springs, Arkansas. We lived in the city for most of the year, but my father thought it was important for us to experience nature. He believed it would teach us about responsibility and respect for the environment. The car ride from Dallas seemed to stretch an eternity. My brother and I were still young, so Mom did her best to keep us entertained. That way Dad could focus on the road. The property consisted of over 10 acres of undisturbed forest. The only building was a small single-room cabin with no running water or electricity, just a wood stove for cooking. There was also an outhouse, but I wouldn't consider that a building. I was 11 at the time, and my brother was about 9, so I was allowed to explore the property on my own, whereas my brother had to stay within sight of our parents. I was always happy to go on my own adventures and discover new places. Creeks, caves, and I even found a secret waterfall once. My parents would even let me camp out on my own when I wanted to, so it was not unusual for me to disappear for the night sometimes. On one of my adventures, I came across another cabin nestled in the woods. I wasn't supposed to leave our property, but rules are meant to be broken, I guess. Curious as I was, I knocked on the door. 2 old ladies greeted me with warm smiles. One was short with a hunched back and long dressing gown. The other was taller with a purple cardigan and looked like she could have been a librarian, a teacher, or something like that. "Hello, dear. You must be a long way from home," one of the women said. "Sorry, I was just exploring and I must be lost," I replied. "It's no problem. Come in," the other woman offered. I had been out for hours and was happy to take a break. We sat at the table and I told them of my adventures in the woods. My stories were probably pretty boring, but the kind old ladies humored me. We had dinner afterwards and sat on the couch together. They had a beautiful white cat who sat on my lap. We must have lost track of time because the sun had almost set. "You can stay the night if you'd like. I'm sure your parents won't mind," one of them offered. "Okay, it's probably too dark to walk home," I conceded. They set up a bed for me, and I went right to sleep. In the morning, they saw me off and I returned home. I told my parents what happened. I told them about the cabin and the 2 ladies, and how they were so kind to me. I even told them about the white cat. Although they weren't mad, they insisted that they meet these ladies. Later that day, the 4 of us embarked on the long trek to the cabin. When we arrived, however, all we found were the remains of a small cottage that appeared to have been abandoned for years. Everyone was very confused, me most of all. My family was ready to write me off as a liar when we saw something. A skinny white cat ran past us and darted into the trees, leaving us in utter shock. I may never be able to explain what happened that night. Sometimes I wonder if it was all a strangely vivid dream, but it felt so real. Some years later, I was doing some research online to see if I could find anything about the abandoned cabin. An article came up. The headline read, "Sisters moved to remote cabin to live off the land." The picture matched the 2 old ladies perfectly, and the article was dated July 1st, 1925. My cousin Kevin and I were very close when we were younger. As we grew up, however, life happened. I went to college out of state, and he stayed in our hometown of Spokane, Washington. We used to spend summers camping with our parents in the vast forests that surrounded our home. That's why I was thrilled to land a job back in Spokane. This would be a chance for me to reconnect with family and friends that I'd only seen on holidays for the last several years. Kevin and I, while having some drinks one night, came up with the idea of renting a cabin in the national forest where we had made so many fond memories throughout our childhood. "So you're up for it?" he asked. "Definitely. I think I can get the week off work," I confirmed with much enthusiasm. The following weeks seemed to drag on as the special date approached. My eyes were glued to the big clock on the wall of my office. I giggled with delight when the hand hit 5 o'clock on Friday. We took Kevin's truck. He's an avid outdoorsman while I'm more of a city slicker, so he had all the gear and skills to make this trip a reality. Kevin knows all about the plants and animals in the area and how to be safe with regards to bears, mountain lions, and the like. We cracked jokes and reminisced about the past while we made our way out of the city. I peered out the window with delight as the urban sprawl transformed into rugged wilderness. "This is going to be great," I said out loud. We arrived at the cabin at around dusk. It was even more remote than I was expecting. There was no running water, no electricity, and no phone. And it was almost an hour's drive down a private road. We were all alone. Kevin and I unloaded the truck quickly as the sun dipped below the horizon. "I say we call it a night now, so we can get an early start tomorrow," I suggested. "You read my mind," Kevin agreed. I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. We woke up at the crack of dawn and were greeted with a beautiful sunrise. Eager to explore the many trails in the area, we set off immediately. "This place is amazing," I raved. "Yeah, it's great," Kevin agreed. Something in his tone, however, struck me as odd. It was a lack of excitement. Kevin was every bit as thrilled about this trip as me, so I wondered why that changed. "You all right, man?" I asked. "I'm fine. It's just..." He trailed off, a look of fear in his eyes. "What is it?" I prodded. "I heard some noises outside the cabin last night. It was probably nothing," he said. "Maybe it was just an animal," I offered. "Yeah, must have been. Don't worry about it." We continued exploring the trails for the rest of the day. Although he wouldn't admit it, I sensed that Kevin was still uneasy from whatever he heard during the night when I was asleep. He knows what animals sound like, so his concern was troubling to me. As the sun began to set, we were exhausted from the day's activities. I walked towards the cabin as Kevin went to the truck to get something. As I got closer, I noticed what looked like human footprints around the cabin in places where neither Kevin nor I had walked. Just then, I heard rustling in the bushes behind the cabin. I turned to look, and for a brief moment, I saw a man's face peering back at me before it disappeared into the foliage. Someone was there. I ran to Kevin at the truck and blurted out what I saw. We jumped into the truck and took off right away. Slowly, we made our way down the dirt road in the dark. The headlights were barely enough to find our way out. Some time has passed since then. I can never be sure who the mystery man was or what his intentions were. He may have been looking to rob us, or it could have been much worse. Kevin and I are still close, and we've decided not to let this incident scare us away from the outdoors. We're planning a river rafting trip next summer with a large group, so if anything like this happens again, at least we'll have numbers on our side. This took place last summer. My name is Alan, and I've always loved the outdoors. That's why I try to hike at least one new trail each year. My girlfriend Andrea suggested an interesting hike not far from our home. We set off excited for what the day may bring. It was a rugged trail, one that had not seen as much traffic as others I've hiked. It was marked with the occasional yellow plastic square to every 10th or 11th tree. We were having so much fun that after a while, we hardly noticed that the plastic markers were nowhere to be found. We were lost. There was no need to panic. We were both experienced hikers and we had plenty of food and water. Andrea and I simply tried to go back the way we came. Unfortunately, we couldn't find our way back to the trail. Everything looked the same. After about an hour, we reached a clearing with a small cabin right in the middle. As we approached, I noticed fresh tire tracks near the front of the cabin, but no vehicles. "This is good. There are people here," Andrea said. "Yep, we just need to wait for them to come back and they can take us out," I replied casually. "Let's check if anyone is home, just in case," Andrea suggested. Good idea, I agreed. I walked to the front entrance and rattled my fist against the solid wood door. No answer. Andrea peered in through the window, then looked back at me as if she'd seen a ghost. She didn't say a word. I went over to her and looked in. What I saw shook me to the core. There was a large pile of money and several guns. Whatever was going on there, we didn't want any part of it. Just then, we heard the fast approaching sound of an engine. Andrea and I bolted into the woods, just in time as a black pickup truck entered the clearing. We watched as two men exited the truck. We could see them talking, but couldn't hear. One of them must have noticed our footprints because he pointed directly at us. We ran faster than I thought possible. I could hear the men chasing us. Fortunately, they were too slow. Andrea and I were strong hikers, and we were used to the rugged land. We eventually found our way back to the trail and returned to the car as soon as possible. We went back to the cabin with the police, but when we arrived, it was empty and the truck was gone. The officer told us that the cabin had been abandoned and the men must have been using it as a drug checkpoint, whatever that is. I don't think they ever found the guys. It was a terrifying incident, but I still hike new trails all the time. Bad things can happen no matter where you go or what you do. I won't let this stop me.